Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this weekend edition of Australian Indian Radio and Gentex Multimedia. Well, it's wonderful to have your company as usual, and today we have a special treat for you later on as well. But right now, let's get on with the news. Chris Dawson sentenced for 24 years.
Mr. Dawson is not old by contemporary standards, but the reality is that he will not live to reach the end of his non-parole period, or will alternatively, by reason of his deteriorating cognitive condition and physical capacity, become seriously disabled well before then, even if he does. I am nevertheless required to impose a sentence that satisfies the community's expectations of punishment, retribution and denunciation. A just and appropriate sentence must accord due recognition to the human dignity of the victim of domestic violence and the legitimate interest of the general community in denunciation and punishment of someone who kills his spouse. Even though such expectations must be tempered by the need to extend mercy where appropriate, I recognise that the unavoidable prospect is that Mr. Dawson will probably die in jail. Mr. Dawson, would you please stand? Christopher Michael Dawson, for the murder of Lynette Dawson on or about 8 January 1982, I sentence you to imprisonment for 24 years, commencing on 30 August 2022 and expiring on 29 August 2046, with a non-parole period of 18 years expiring on 29 August 2040. The first day upon which you will become eligible for release on parole is therefore 30 August 2040. You may sit down. Finally, in compliance with Section 25 capital C of the Crimes High Risk Offenders Act, I note that the provisions of that Act have potential application to you. Mr. Walsh may be expected to provide you with further information about that. Are there any other matters before I adjourn? Mr. Dawson, would you please go with the officers now?
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, justice done at last, and as he mentioned that he will probably die in jail. Well, the next case, a rape charge that's been dropped against Bruce Lehman.
The case galvanised and divided the nation. Bruce Lehman was accused of raping Brittany Higgins at Parliament House after a night out drinking. He pleaded not guilty and always protested his innocence. But the trial came unstuck after a juror's misconduct and a retrial was ordered. But today, the prosecution pulled the pin.
I've made the difficult decision that it is no longer in the public interest to pursue a prosecution at the risk of a complainant's life.
The decision was based on reports from 2 experts.
The evidence makes it clear that this is not limited to the harm of giving evidence in a witness box, rather applies whether or not the complainant is required to enter a witness box during a retrial.
A spokeswoman for Ms Higgins released a statement saying Brittany is in hospital getting the treatment and support she needs. While it's disappointing the trial has ended this way, Brittany's health and safety must always come first. When the story first broke, Brittany Higgins' allegations proved a rallying point. She addressed thousands in front of Parliament House, spoke at the Press Club and received an apology from then Prime Minister Scott Morrison.
I am sorry.
Bruce Lehman maintains his innocence and there's been no findings against him. But the end of the case has come at great cost.
Ms Higgins has faced a level of personal attack that I've not seen in over 20 years of doing this work. She's done so with bravery, grace and dignity.
There's been no comment from Bruce Lehman or his lawyers today, in an end unlikely to satisfy anyone. Elizabeth Byrne, ABC News, Canberra.
So there you are. What do you make of that news? Do you reckon it's the right thing? Well, of course, the health and safety always comes in first, but on the other hand, the law and the justice must be done. Well, the other case is the Islamic State terrorist has been extradited from Darwin to Melbourne.
Almost a decade after allegedly leaving Australia for Syria, Neil Prakash is back on home soil. Deported by Turkish authorities, he arrived in Darwin, where federal police officers were waiting.
Mr Prakash
was taken into custody. He obviously faces serious terrorism offences.
Within hours, he'd faced a Darwin court, where authorities successfully applied to have him extradited to Victoria.
And there he will be charged by the AFP Victorian Joint Counter-Terrorism Team.
The 31-year-old, who was raised in Melbourne, will face 6 charges. They'll include entering a declared area in Syria, being a member of Islamic State and being involved in a terrorist act. At today's hearing, it was revealed Mr Prakash recently had his Australian citizenship reinstated after it was stripped from him in 2018. Australian authorities have been pursuing him for years. In 2016, he was reported dead.
Neil Prakash, an Australian citizen, was killed by a US airstrike in Mosul in Iraq on the 29th of April.
But months later it emerged he was alive and had been arrested by Turkish authorities on the Syrian border. Australian officials have been working to bring him home ever since.
We can actually use our partnerships and use our footprint around the world to track these people down and bring them back here to justice.
Under the terms of the extradition order, Neil Prakash must be brought to Melbourne by December the 9th. Until that happens, he'll remain in custody in the Northern Territory.
There is no threat to the Australian community. Other than that, it's a matter before the courts, so that's as much as I'll comment now.
Victorian authorities won't say where Mr Prakash will be held when he arrives in Melbourne. Danny Morgan, ABC News.
So there you go. Finally he's been caught what a big announcement made in the Parliament House that he's actually passed away, or he was killed in an attack, only to be found to be alive later on. And Neil Prakash, where does he get a name like that as well, is beyond me. But right now, let's go to the next news once again on the similar is the IR law. So today we've mainly been focusing around all the laws and the things of the parliament and the judiciary system. So the controversial IR law has been approved in Parliament.
The question is resolved in the affirmative.
An unscheduled early Friday morning sitting delivers a key plank of Labor's agenda into law.
Today is a win for the heroes of the pandemic. The cleaners, the disability workers, the aged care workers.
Parliament's lower house rubber stamping the Secure Jobs Better Pay bill before 9 a.m.
We are in favour of Australian workers receiving more in their pay packets, but we are not in support of Australian small businesses going broke.
The legislation encourages new multi-employer pay deals, which the government insists will result in higher wages, particularly for those in low-paid sectors. An early Christmas present for unions.
It's a generational change in making our workplace laws fairer, simpler, better.
It won't be good for the economy, it won't create jobs, and it won't end up boosting wages.
And so Parliament ends for the year with Labor securing 2 significant wins on industrial relations and an anti-corruption watchdog. But outstanding challenges could prove much trickier, like bringing down energy bills and addressing other cost of living pressures. For now, though, attention's turning to the Christmas break.
Somehow, Richard maintains a perfect tan year round. And so for Richard, I've got him next year's supply of a little bit of tanning spray here.
Peter needs help, so I have him a lightsaber,
right,
which you can use in question time.
Parliamentary hostilities resume in February. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
And getting a well-deserved break for Christmas Day. Well, right now, moving on. This, as was reported, this was the last sitting week of the Parliament.
The National Party has made a position that we will not support the Voice to Parliament.
We are here to serve Australian citizens of all backgrounds, and it is not right to divide us along the lines of race. It is not racist to disagree with a proposal that's been put forward to the Australian people that lacks detail.
Obviously, Jacinta Price's entry into the Parliament that has turned everything around, but it is also this leader, this apparent supposed leader, Littleproud, little pride, a man of little pride. And he's like a kindergarten kid, not a leader. The Nationals have foisted the mantle of leadership on a boy who's incapable of the leadership that's necessary for the country and for his party. Jacinta's a very compelling figure, but she's caught in a vortex. She's caught in a vortex, and ultimately it's a tragic redneck celebrity vortex that she's caught up in.
I would hope that the Nationals would really reconsider the cheapness. She can have a view, but she doesn't represent the Aboriginal people of this country.
Power should never be abused. This was an abuse of power.
It is an affront to democracy.
The concept that the Parliament knows who has which job is essential to responsible government.
An exercise by this government in political payback and distraction.
He knew at the time that it was a problem and did not tell the Parliament.
I know he is deeply concerned about what this means, no doubt, for his legacy.
None of us can claim to be infallible in such circumstances, and I do not. But, Mr. Speaker, I do not apologise for taking action, especially prudent redundancy action in a national crisis in order to save lives and to save livelihoods.
This place runs on rules and conventions. The mere existence of the office of Prime Minister and the existence of a cabinet is a convention. It's not in the Constitution.
It was back in 2008 that I approached the then Leader of the House of Representatives with the request that photographs of former leaders of the House be permanently displayed on the wall outside the Leader of the House's office in the ministerial wing. I hoped that my political legacy back in 2008 might include a likeness always here in this building. If you'll forgive me, I had this vain hope of achieving something approaching political immortality. Well, it was to the great credit of the then Leader of the House, Anthony Albanese, that he agreed to that request. And so now there will be 3 likenesses of mine, one in the ministerial wing, one in the party room, and now this wonderful portrait hanging here. As indeed there will be of Anthony Albanese soon enough.
Australian democracy is a great national achievement. It needs to be nourished, cared for, treated with respect, protected from the threat of extremism and polarisation and the corrosive influence of corruption and cynicism. And that is one of the compelling reasons we need a National Anti-Corruption Commission. This is a day that will change politics for the better. It will help us change our nation for the better. And I commend the bill to the House.
To those workers who've been trapped on zombie agreements back from the work choices era for nearly 20 years, you are about to catch up with the rest of the Australian workforce.
The result of the division is ayes 78, noes 42. The question is resolved in the affirmative. The House stands adjourned until Monday, 6th of February 2023 at 10 a.m.
There you are, a great ending to the parliamentary sitting for this year until it resumes now in February. Well, right now, going overseas, Prince William is preparing to dazzle US in a 3-day visit.
This is the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library, and it was John F. Kennedy's famous moonshot speech where he talked about wanting to get someone on the moon by the end of a decade that inspired the Earthshot Prize that Prince William will hand out awards for later this evening. That's about climate action, about people who can make a real difference to global warming by the end end of this century. So the Prince and the President currently meeting in this building behind me. The Princess has a different engagement today, and there's a bit of a crowd here, but actually a lot of these people have come to protest a domestic issue. The President has signed a bill which prevents railroad workers from striking, but also amongst this crowd a number of royal fans. Now, while many of them are aware, of course, of the controversy that surrounds this visit, that's the allegations of racism directed at Prince William's godmother over her conduct at a Buckingham Palace reception, and then the release of the trailer for Harry and Meghan's tell-all documentary. People are aware of it, but they're still pretty excited to have the royals here in town.
It's an historic moment. It's just been marvelous to have the Prince and Princess here, and the work they're doing is going to impact all of us.
It's kind of like my celebrities I follow. I don't really follow, like professional athletes. I don't really follow like pop culture celebrities, musicians, but like the royalty, the British royal family and other like European royal families. That's like my celebrity.
We do live in the 21st century, and racial justice is still a fight I face and many other students of color and people of color around the world face. So it is something they should be called out for.
Barbara, later the Prince and Princess will attend an awards gala for their Climate Action Prize. What can we expect there?
That's right, they're handing out prizes in 5 categories, as I said, for people seen to be taking action that can make a real difference by 2030. Now, one of the finalists for those awards is a group of female Indigenous Rangers from Queensland, and the way the maths work there, they have a 1 in 3 chance of a pretty substantial financial prize were they to be picked. And of course the Prince and Princess will be hoping that today can really go off without a hitch. This is the culmination of this 3-day visit. It's been a pretty difficult visit. They were also booed at a Celtics game. They also arrived in pretty terrible weather. So nothing seems to have gone well for them so far. So the hope is that awards ceremony, kicking off pretty shortly, is really going to go off without a hitch.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on the weekend edition of Australian Intro. Well, right now, as I mentioned before, the bonus for today.
के मानता नहीं दिल है के मानता नहीं मुश्किल बरी है रस्में मोहब्बत ये जानता
क्यों हो
हर पल तुम्हें हम बस यूं ही देखा करें, मर के भी हम ना तुमसे जुदा हो, आओ कुछ ऐसा करें, मुझ में समा जा, पास आ जा, हमदम मेरे हम नशी। सांसें बेचैन आंखें कहने लगी बस यूं ही, दिल है कि मानता
And a beautiful, beautiful rendition there by Mithun and Bondita. Always a pleasure to have them on the show. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to say goodbye, and it's been wonderful having your company on this third day of December. Well, the temperature right now is 23 degrees and cloudy in Brisbane, and it's tipped to go up to 25 later in the day. It's been wonderful having your company. Until Monday, it's goodbye from us. We'll catch you back at 9 a.m. on Monday. Until then, it's goodbye from us, and it's always a pleasure to have your company.